From Ducky's cringy serial killer romance in Season 9 to Tony's crazy obsessive behavior in Season 7, NCIS has had its fair share of episodes that fans absolutely hate. Naturally, the show had to have some flops in its 20 years, so buckle up, let's take a look at some of the worst NCIS episodes. I'll start with Roadkill from Season 6, an episode that just didn't win over the fans. Kicking off with a single car collision and a petty officer's friend stumbling into the woods only to die, the episode seemed pretty intense from the start, but when bullet holes in the car frame were discovered, that's when things started going downhill. As Gibbs and the crew dug into the case, they found out the victim was part of a secret fight club. Sounds thrilling, right? Well, not so much. The Fight Club Angel, which could have been super exciting, ended up feeling cliched, honestly, a bit of a letdown. Then there's the whole deal with Abby tracking down a suspicious vehicle, leading to another dead guy. It was meant to be a shocking twist, but it felt kind of predictable. Each team member chipped in, but it was McGee who finally put the pieces together and solved the case. So why didn't fans dig this episode? The secret Fight Club thing had potential, but it was wasted on an underwhelming and cliched storyline. But if you thought that episode was messy, wait till you take a look at this one. Yes, I'm talking about Season 7, Episode 21, Obsession. Picture this. A Navy lieutenant suddenly dies while trying to make it to the ER, and our NCIS team is on the case. Tony volunteers to interview the lieutenant's sister, but when he and Ziva show up, the sister has ghosted them. What's up with that? Gibbs and Ziva investigate further and find out some sketchy stuff is going down at the Navy Info Ops Center, where the lieutenant used to work. Meanwhile, DiNozzo is getting a bit too wrapped up in finding the missing sister. So why did fans have a problem with this one? Well, for one, it sticks out like a sore thumb in what many consider to be the best season of the show. I mean, a meh episode among a bunch of amazing ones is bound to stand out. Another thing that bugged fans was Tony's weird behavior. His fixation on finding the sister just didn't feel like something the DiNozzo we all know and love would do, and it made the whole episode feel kind of off. Plus, the usual fun banter and teamwork vibes between him and the gang just weren't there. And let's not forget the plot. It was all over the place and just didn't live up to the NCIS gold standard we're used to. So yeah, Obsession didn't hit the mark for a lot of fans, and it goes down in history as one of the least favorite episodes in the series. Moving on, let's talk about one of my least favorite episodes, the 6th episode of Season 9, titled Thirst. In this one, we've got this crazy accident where a semi-truck crashes into a Navy officer. Initially, it seems like a straightforward case, but then Ducky discovers that the officer died from water intoxication. As he digs deeper, he gets some help from a woman named Mary Courtney, played by Cheryl Ladd of Charlie's Angels fame. They're hitting it off, and it's all good until, bam, she's revealed to be a serial killer. Talk about a bad date, right? So why didn't fans dig this episode? Firstly, they just weren't feeling the whole Mary Courtney situation, and it kind of threw off the entire episode. But that's not the only reason the episode didn't work. Some people didn't love the storyline and felt it was a bit far-fetched, even for NCIS. I mean, water intoxication? Really? Another thing that didn't sit well with fans was the way Ducky's character was portrayed in this episode. It's like he had a lapse in judgment when it came to Courtney, which is pretty unusual for our favorite medical examiner. Fans just couldn't buy into the fact that he'd be so easily charmed by a serial killer, you know? So yeah, this episode was a bit of a flop, but hey, no show is perfect. Now, let's move on to an episode that many people find pretty offensive. Yep, I'm talking about Tribes. The Season 5 episode got one of the lowest ratings in the show's history, and honestly, it makes sense. Here's why fans hated it so much. Picture this. A Marine who happens to be Muslim is found dead, and our favorite NCIS crew is called in to crack the case. The victim's dad is the local imam. He asks Gibbs and the gang not to perform an autopsy on his son's body. He wants to make sure his son's remains stay intact so he can ascend to heaven. Now, you know Ducky is usually all about getting up close and personal with the dead, but this time he decides to respect the father's wishes. Instead, he comes up with an unorthodox method to investigate the cause of death. And boy, does it lead to some unexpected twists and turns. But here's the thing. While the episode might have had an intriguing premise, it didn't quite deliver for a lot of fans. Some felt that the portrayal of the Muslim community was a bit cliched and stereotypical, which is never a great look. Others thought the story took some weird turns and didn't always make sense. On top of all that, the episode just didn't have the usual NCIS magic. The pacing was off, the characters didn't seem quite as engaging, and the suspense just wasn't there. So all in all, Tribes was a bit of a letdown for many fans. And speaking of letdowns, I gotta talk about this Season 4 episode that annoys me to this day. It's called Brothers in Arms, and it's a seriously bad one. In this episode, a homeless shelter gets caught in some drive-by gunfire. While Jen is trying to dig up some information on this shady character called the Frog, fans were not happy about that whole situation. And can you blame them? After this wild shooting leaves a key informant dead, Gibbs and the gang are on the case. FBI agent Fornell gets sent in by the CIA, but our girl Jen is feeling pretty confident that she can crack this case all by herself. But as it turns out, it's Abby and Ducky who end up making some jaw-dropping discoveries that move things along. The episode wraps up with this intense cat and mouse chase. But guess what? The Frog manages to slip away in the end. So why do fans consider this one of the worst NCIS episodes? The storyline felt a bit rushed and all over the place. Plus, fans were left feeling kind of frustrated that the whole thing ended with the Frog getting away. It just didn't have that satisfying, classic NCIS resolution we all know and love. So there you have it. Brothers in Arms didn't quite hit the mark for a lot of fans, but there are a bunch of NCIS episodes to watch instead. Let's wrap up this video with one final horrible NCIS episode. It's called Cracked, and it's a doozy. Alright, let's get real here, folks. Many fans adore Abby Shiudo, the chief forensic scientist. So, when they saw her acting like a petulant child in this episode, they were just pissed. In this one, the team investigates the case of a Navy researcher who gets hit by a bus. But the plot thickens when Abby finds a bunch of mysterious codes written all over the victim's body. She becomes obsessed with cracking the codes, but the rest of the team starts to worry that she's more focused on the codes than figuring out how the researcher died, and who might have been involved in her death. The episode doesn't exactly show her in the best light. Also, it seems like this wasn't a one-time thing. Fans noticed that the writers kept putting Abby in similar situations, where she'd get way too wrapped up in one aspect of the case. And they weren't here for it. Well, that's all I've got on the worst NCIS episodes of all time.